So I saw Tenet for a second time, and upon a second watch, I definitely don't feel like my opinion has changed that radically. However, I feel as though I missed a lot of stuff in my first review that I still want to touch on. I was originally going to make a spoiler review, however, since the film still has some time before it's released in most countries but my own, I'd rather just make this part 2 of my non-spoiler review and go more in depth. So if you haven't seen part 1 of my review, I will put the link in the description below. As a whole, the film is good. It's innovative, original, exciting, and well made. I personally wouldn't put it on the same level as a lot of other Christopher Nolan's work, but I still had a blast overall. On the first viewing of the film, I mentioned that I felt that John David Washington was a great addition to the film, and I definitely stand by that. His performance was great, and as far as his character goes, one of my biggest praises in part 1 was the fact that the protagonist actually came across as smart and critically minded. In Western media, we're so used to seeing the lead protagonist being the average intelligence relatable one, which is fine. However, average intelligence and relatability is too often mistaken for intellectually lazy and immature. How many times in sci-fi and action movies have we seen the stereotypically nerdy character desperately trying to explain complex sci-fi theories to our lead protagonist, and our lead protagonist says something along the lines of, "Speak English."
We were attempting to use concentrated bursts of energy to enhance the sensitivity of optical telescopes. In the process, we had a breakthrough. Given enough energy, we could warp the very fabric of space.
I said, explain it to me, not talk science. Look, all right, I'll tell you what. Why don't you guys just keep talking? I'll just sit here until you figure out what it is you really want to tell me.
They found a way to fold space back onto itself.
All right, look. We're used to viewing space as flat, right? Like this piece of paper. To see something from a distance, light has always had to travel the long way across the flat space in between. But given what I was trying to explain, we could fold the space, bring the target closer to us, create what's known as an Einstein-Rosen bridge, otherwise known as a wormhole, suspend it via gravitational field.
Hey, let me ask you something. Is she alive or is she dead?
You went to her funeral,
I know
dog.
that, but I think the question still applies. Is she alive or is she dead?
All right, life, like time and space, is not merely a local phenomenon.
All right! Am I asking a hard question?
Looks like I picked a bad week to stop snorting hash.
All right, I tell you what. I'll speak slow so those of you with PhDs in the room can understand. Here, look. Here's a monitor, right? Now, the monitor is broken. It's dead. It is not temporarily transitioned to another state of entropy. It's dead, right? Now, is she alive or is she dead?
She's alive.
All right, now we're getting somewhere.
What made Tenet interesting and stand out in this regard is the lead protagonist's mature and genuinely curious approach to the world he was entering. He would constantly be asking questions and trying to keep up with the things he was discovering. It's rare to see a lead hero that genuinely respects science and practices critical thinking.
All right, life, like time and space, is not merely a local phenomenon.
All right!
And I found that profoundly refreshing. However, one of my biggest issues I had with the film was with the lead character's development. Christopher Nolan didn't need to have the typical dead wife trope to do more to humanize the protagonist, and I get that shoving in a tragic backstory can feel like a box-ticking exercise if not done properly, but I still feel like the film was somewhat lacking emotionally. I was hoping I would come to understand the protagonist's character on a second watch, but it just didn't happen. So, another big issue I had, which I consciously made an effort not to talk about in my first review, was the audio mixing. The reason why I stayed away from this is because I had no idea if it was the theatre I was in or the film. I found it difficult to hear the dialogue because of the bass. I eventually concluded that it must have been the theatre, because on my second watch, they had adjusted the bass so that the dialogue was a lot clearer. However, I've had people, not only in my comment section, but also in articles I've read, having the same problem, so clearly the filmmakers are largely to blame. I also mentioned in my first review that the first third of the film was very messy. It reminded me of the first third of Rogue One almost. Basically, you're thrown into an admittingly very impressive opening action sequence, but are then machine-gunned exposition so rapidly that it's difficult to keep up with everything that's going on. The simplest way to describe it is basically, this character goes to this location, he's spoon-fed information. He goes to this location, he meets someone else. They also spoon-feed him information and tell him where else to go. He goes to that location and is told to go to another location. Oh, and also spoon-feed more information. I feel as though a lot of middlemen could have been cut out to make the film simpler and shorter. This was another aspect that I was hoping would improve upon a second viewing, but it didn't. One thing I also didn't mention in my first review was the dialogue. Although most of it was fine, in fact some of it was very witty, some of it was definitely on the nose. I'll go more into it when I do a spoiler review. One other issue I kinda had was with the ticking time bomb cliche that the film used. Without spoiling it, the film used a visual countdown to create tension on some scenes, which I found disappointing. That's not to say it wasn't effective, and for some films it works. However, if you're making a film that's literally about time travel, then you'd think Christopher Nolan could have found a far more inventive visual representation of time running out than a literal ticking clock, considering he's done that before with Inception. All in all, I do think Tenet is a solid film. I just don't think it quite lived up to its full potential. These are just some extra thoughts I wanted to get out there. I am planning on doing a much more in-depth spoiler review once the film is released. If you haven't already, please check out part 1 of my review. I also have more videos on the way, including a Lord of the Rings analysis. Subscribe if you're interested in those, or not, I don't really care.